I never thought I'd be posting here, but I guess life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. I'm Mike, 32, and up until a few weeks ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Great job, beautiful wife Sarah, 35, and what I believed was a rock-solid marriage. Oh, how wrong I was. Sarah and I met at work 5 years ago. She was already in management, and I was the new guy in marketing. We hit it off immediately, and despite the whole "don't dip your pen in company ink" saying, we started dating. Fast forward 2 years, and we're married with her as my boss. I know what you're thinking. Recipe for disaster, right? But it worked for us, or so I thought. Sarah was always professional at work, and I made sure to never take advantage of our relationship. We kept things separate, you know? But lately, something felt off. Sarah was working later than usual, always on her phone, and our sex life had taken a nosedive. I chalked it up to stress from a big project she was working on. Man, was I naive. Things started getting weird about a month ago. I was heading to the break room when I overheard two of my coworkers, Jessica and Tom, whispering, "Poor Mike, he has no idea." "Shh, he might hear you." They clammed up as soon as they saw me. I brushed it off, thinking they were planning a surprise party or something. God, I wish that had been the case. A week later, I was working late, ironic, right? And decided to surprise Sarah by bringing her favorite takeout to her office. As I approached, I saw her leaving with Jack from accounting. They were laughing, touching each other's arms. Nothing overtly sexual, but something in my gut twisted. I called out, "Hey, honey, brought you dinner." Sarah jumped like she'd seen a ghost. "Mike, what are you doing here so late?" I held up the bag. "Thought you might be hungry." Jack mumbled something about a report and scurried off. Sarah's smile was too bright, too forced. "Thanks, babe. I was just heading out, actually. Rain check?" I nodded, feeling like an idiot with a bag of cold noodles. As she kissed my cheek, I caught a whiff of unfamiliar cologne. That night, Sarah came home late, reeking of booze. When I asked about her night, she spun some story about a client dinner that ran long. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But the next morning, I found a crumpled receipt in her coat pocket from a hotel bar across town. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. The next day at work was a nightmare. Every glance, every whisper felt like it was about me. I couldn't focus on anything. My friend Chris from IT noticed and asked if I was okay. "Yeah, just..." "Sarah's been acting weird lately," I admitted. Chris' face went pale. Look, man, there's something you should know." My heart sank. But before Chris could spill the beans, the fire alarm went off. Seriously, universe. As we evacuated, I lost Chris in the crowd. Outside, I spotted Sarah huddled with a group of executives, including Jack. She was laughing at something he said, her hand on his arm. My blood boiled. Suddenly, there was a commotion. Our CEO, Robert, had collapsed. Heart attack, they said later. In the chaos, I saw Sarah slip away with Jack, heading not towards the parking lot, but to a secluded area behind the building. I followed, my heart pounding. As I turned the corner, I saw them. Sarah had Jack pushed up against the wall, their lips locked in a passionate kiss. My world shattered. "Sarah!" My voice cracked. They sprang apart. Sarah's eyes were wide with panic. "Mike! It's not what it looks like!" I laughed bitterly. "Really? Because it looks like you're fucking Jack behind my back." Jack tried to slink away, but I blocked his path. "How long?" I demanded. Sarah's face hardened. "Mike, you're making a scene. We'll talk about this at home." "No, we'll talk about it now," I shouted, not caring who heard. That's when the sprinklers went off. Apparently, the fire wasn't just a drill. We stood there getting soaked, the absurdity of the situation hitting me like a ton of bricks. Sarah, dripping wet and mascara running, finally broke. "Fine. You want the truth? It's been going on for months, and not just with Jack." The rain of the sprinklers mixed with my tears as I realized just how deep the betrayal went. The chaos at work was nothing compared to what awaited me at home. I stormed into our apartment, Sarah hot on my heels, both of us still damp from the sprinklers. "Not just Jack? Who else, Sarah? How many?" I demanded, my voice raw with emotion. Sarah's face twisted into a sneer. "You really want to know, Mike? Fine. Tom from HR, Jessica from marketing. Jessica? But she's a woman? Yeah, turns out I'm more adventurous than you ever were," Sarah spat. My head was spinning. I stumbled to the couch, collapsing onto it. That's when I felt something hard beneath the cushion. I reached in and pulled out a sex toy, one I'd never seen before. What the hell is this? I held it up, my hand shaking. Sarah's eyes widened for a moment before she composed herself. It's not mine. You must have put it there. Are you kidding me? You're going to lie about this too? Just then, there was a knock at the door. Sarah rushed to answer it before I could. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, an elderly lady who had always been sweet to us. I heard shouting, Mrs. Johnson said, peering around Sarah to look at me. Is everything all right? Before I could respond, Sarah burst into tears. Oh, Mrs. Johnson, it's terrible. Mike, he's been cheating on me. I stood there, mouth agape, the sex toy still in my hand. Mrs. Johnson's eyes darted between us, lingering on the object I was holding. Her face hardened as she looked at me. You should be ashamed of yourself, young man, she scolded. But I didn't, I started, but Sarah cut me off with more theatrical sobs. As Mrs. Johnson comforted my lying wife, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the Starbucks on 5th in 20 minutes. Come alone. Jay. I looked at Sarah, still playing the victim for our neighbor, and made a split-second decision. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Where are you going? Sarah called out, her tears miraculously gone. To get some air, I replied coldly. Don't wait up. As I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that this rabbit hole was about to get a whole lot deeper. I arrived at the Starbucks, my blood boiling with a mixture of hurt and rage. The mysterious Jay turned out to be John from IT, a guy I'd always considered a friend. Mike, I'm so sorry, he said, pushing a coffee towards me. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I sat down, my hands clenched into fists. So you knew, this whole time? John nodded, his eyes full of guilt. Sarah threatened to fire me if I told you, but man, I can't live with this anymore. She's been sleeping with half the office. My mind raced. All those late nights, those client meetings. It all made sense now. But instead of breaking down, I felt a cold determination settle over me. Tell me everything, I demanded. For the next hour, John spilled the beans. Names, dates, locations. He'd been keeping track, feeling guilty but too scared to come forward. By the end, I had a clear picture of Sarah's betrayal, and the seeds of a plan began to form. John, I said, my voice eerily calm, I need access to Sarah's work emails and calendar. His eyes widened. Mike, that's illegal. I could lose my job. I leaned in close. You could lose a lot more than that if I decide to tell Sarah who ratted her out. The color drained from John's face. He nodded slowly and pulled out his laptop. Within minutes, I had everything I needed. Sarah's entire sordid history laid bare before me, but I wasn't interested in exposing her. No, that would be too easy. I wanted her to feel the humiliation, the betrayal, the gut-wrenching pain I was feeling. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Where are you? Come home now. We need to talk. I smiled for the first time in days. Oh, well, talk all right, I muttered. I stood up, my mind clear and focused. Thanks, John. You've been a real pal, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. As I left the Starbucks, I pulled out my phone and made a call. Hey, is this Ashley's escort service? I'd like to book your premium package for tomorrow night. The client, Sarah Johnson. Yeah, she'll be at the Hilton downtown, room 1412. It's a surprise for her husband. I hung up, a grim satisfaction settling over me. This was just the beginning. Sarah thought she was so clever, juggling all her little affairs. Well, let's see how she handles it when her carefully constructed house of cards comes crashing down. As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. Sarah had no idea what was coming. By the time I was done, she'd wish she'd never even thought about cheating. The game was on, and I intended to win. I walked into our apartment, a fake smile plastered on my face. Sarah was pacing, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Mike, where have you been? I've been worried sick, she exclaimed, her voice dripping with fake concern. I shrugged. Just needed some air. You know, to process the fact that my wife is the office bicycle. Sarah's face contorted with anger, but before she could speak, I continued. But hey, I've been thinking. Maybe we can work this out. How about a nice dinner tomorrow night, to talk things through? The look of surprise on her face was priceless. Really? You want to work things out? I nodded, playing the part of the forgiving husband perfectly. The Hilton downtown. He'll book us a room. We can have dinner, talk, maybe reconnect. Sarah's relief was palpable. She threw her arms around me, mumbling apologies. I hugged her back, my skin crawling at her touch. The next day at work was surreal. I smiled and nodded at my coworkers, many of whom I now knew had slept with my wife. I even chatted with Jack from accounting, resisting the urge to punch his smug face. At 6 p.m., I told Sarah I'd meet her at the hotel. "I've got a surprise planned," I said with a wink. As soon as she left, I sprang into action. I'd spent the day sending emails from Sarah's account, inviting her various lovers to meet her at the hotel for some fun. Jack, Tom, Jessica, they were all going to be there. I arrived at the Hilton early, slipping the concierge $100 to let me into room 1412. I set up hidden cameras, totally illegal, but at this point I was beyond caring. At 7 p.m. I got a text from Sarah. "In the lobby, where are you?" I replied, "Sorry, running late. Go up to room 1412. I'll be there soon." I watched from a hidden spot as Sarah entered the room, confusion evident on her face as she found it empty. Then, one by one, her lovers started arriving. The look of panic on her face as she tried to manage the situation was almost comical. But the real kicker, that's when Ashley's escort service showed up. 5 gorgeous men and women, all expecting to be paid for a wild night with Sarah Johnson. As chaos erupted in the room, with Sarah trying to explain, her lovers feeling betrayed, and the escorts demanding payment, I calmly walked to the hotel bar. "Whiskey, neat," I told the bartender. "And can you put on Channel 5 on that TV?" He obliged, and I sat back, sipping my drink as I watched the local news. Any minute now, they'd be breaking in with a special report about a disturbance at the Hilton, featuring none other than Sarah Johnson, rising star in the business world, caught in a scandalous situation. My phone buzzed. A panicked text from Sarah. "Mike, where are you? Something terrible has happened. I need you." I smiled, typing back, "Sorry, honey. I don't think this marriage is going to work out after all. But don't worry. I'm sure one of your many lovers will comfort you. That is, if they're not too busy comforting each other." As I hit send, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness beneath my satisfaction. This was the end of my marriage, but it was also the beginning of my new life, and I was just getting started. The aftermath of my hotel stunt was more explosive than I'd anticipated. By midnight, Sarah's scandal was all over social media. #office sleep around was trending, with grainy cell phone footage of the hotel room chaos going viral. I'd barely slept when my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was Robert, our CEO. "Mike, what the hell is going on? I need you in my office now." I arrived at the office to find it in complete disarray. Sarah was there, mascara streaked down her face, along with Jack, Tom, and Jessica. They all glared at me as I walked in. Robert looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Explain now." I put on my best innocent face. "I'm as shocked as you are, sir. I had no idea my wife was involved with so many of our colleagues." Sarah lunged at me, screaming, "You bastard! You set this up!" Security had to restrain her. I couldn't help but smirk, which only fueled her rage. Robert rubbed his temples. "This is a PR nightmare. We're going to have to let some people go." "You can't fire me!" Sarah shrieked. "He'll sue for wrongful termination." That's when I dropped my bombshell. "Actually, sir, you might want to check the company's finances before making any decisions." The room went silent. Sarah's face drained of color. I continued, "I have reason to believe there might be some irregularities in the accounts Sarah's been handling." Robert's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying, Mike?" "I'm saying, sir, that while my wife was busy sleeping her way through the office, she might also have been embezzling funds." The chaos that erupted was beautiful to behold. Sarah lunged at me again, this time managing to land a solid slap before security pulled her off. Jack and Tom started arguing, each accusing the other of being the mastermind behind the embezzlement. As the shouting reached a fever pitch, there was a loud bang. We all turned to see Jessica, sweet, quiet Jessica, standing there with a smoking gun in her hand. She'd shot the ceiling. "Everybody shut up!" she yelled, her voice shrill with panic. "None of you understand. The mob is involved. We're all in danger." The room fell silent again, this time with a palpable sense of fear. I couldn't believe it. My simple revenge plot had somehow uncovered a web of crime that went far beyond mere infidelity. Suddenly, the fire alarm went off. Through the window, I saw men in dark suits entering the building. Robert turned to me, his face ashen. "Mike, what have you done?" I looked around the room at the faces of my cheating wife, her lovers, and my backstabbing colleagues. For the first time since this all began, I felt a twinge of regret. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think we're about to find out." As the sound of heavy footsteps approached the office, I realized that my quest for revenge had opened a Pandora's box, and now we were all going to have to face the consequences. As the chaos in Robert's office reached a fever pitch, the door burst open. But instead of the expected men in dark suits, in walked Linda from HR, flanked by two burly security guards. "That's enough!" Linda's voice cut through the noise like a knife. The room fell silent. She surveyed the scene with a mix of disgust and disappointment. "I've been gathering evidence on all of you for months. The affairs, the embezzlement, the lies. It ends today." Sarah's face contorted with rage. "You! But you're just a paper pusher from HR." Linda's laugh was cold. "Oh, Sarah, you never did pay attention to the little people, did you? I'm not just from HR. I'm the owner's daughter working undercover to root out corruption in the company my father built." The shock on everyone's faces was palpable. Robert looked like he was about to faint. Linda turned to me. "Mike, I owe you an apology. We've known about Sarah's infidelity for a while, but we needed proof of the embezzlement. Your unconventional methods gave us exactly what we needed." I stood there, stunned. "You knew? All this time?" She nodded. "We couldn't tip our hand, but now, thanks to you, we can clean house." The security guards moved in, separating Sarah, Jack, Tom, and Jessica from the rest of us. Linda continued, "You're all fired, effective immediately. The authorities have been notified about the embezzlement. I suggest you all lawyer up." As they were being let out, Sarah managed to break free. She ran at me, eyes wild with fury. "You ruined everything! I hope you're happy, you bastard!" Before she could reach me, one of the security guards intercepted her, gently but firmly restraining her. Linda turned to Robert. "As for you, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Your willful ignorance of this situation is nearly as bad as active participation." Robert nodded meekly, looking utterly defeated. Finally, Linda addressed me. "Mike, I know this must be overwhelming, but I need to ask you something. We're going to need someone to help us untangle this mess. Someone who knows the inside workings but isn't implicated in the corruption. Would you be willing to help us?" I stared at her, my mind reeling from everything that had just happened. My revenge plan had somehow turned into a corporate sting operation, and now I was being offered a chance to help set things right. I don't know what to say," I stammered. Linda smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "You don't have to decide right now. Take some time, think it over. But know this, you've done a good thing here, even if your methods were unorthodox." As I left the office that day, my head was spinning. My marriage was over, my workplace was in shambles, but somehow I felt lighter than I had in years. The day after the dramatic revelations in the office, I woke up to a flood of missed calls and text messages. My phone buzzed incessantly as news of the company's scandal spread like wildfire. I dragged myself out of bed, made a strong cup of coffee, and started sifting through the messages. Most were from concerned coworkers asking if I was okay and what would happen next. A few were from reporters, hungry for an inside scoop. I ignored those. One message stood out. From Linda. "Mike, meet me at the office at 9. We need to talk about next steps." I arrived at the office to find it in a state of controlled chaos. Security guards were posted at the entrance, checking IDs. Inside, people huddled in small groups, whispering anxiously. The tension was palpable. Linda was waiting in the conference room, along with a man I didn't recognize. She looked tired but determined. "Mike, thanks for coming. This is David Chen, our company lawyer," she said, gesturing to the man. David nodded grimly. "Mr. Johnson, I understand you've been through a lot, but we need to discuss the legal implications of recent events." For the next hour, we went over everything: my discovery of Sarah's affairs, my revenge plan, the evidence of embezzlement. David took copious notes, his frown deepening with each revelation. "Look," he said finally, The good news is that you're not implicated in the embezzlement scheme. The bad news is that some of your actions in exposing it were legally questionable. My heart sank. Am I in trouble? Linda jumped in. That's what we're trying to prevent, Mike. We appreciate what you did, but we need to handle this carefully moving forward. David nodded. For now, we advise you to refrain from speaking to anyone about this, especially the press. We'll need to coordinate our statements. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. You think you've won? This isn't over. I'll take you down with me if I have to. I showed the message to Linda and David. They exchanged worried glances. Mike, Linda said softly, I know this is hard, but you need to cut all contact with Sarah. Anything you say or do can be used against you. I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. What happens now? We're conducting a full audit, Linda explained. Once we have all the facts, we'll coordinate with the authorities. In the meantime, we'd like you to continue working, but in a different department to avoid any conflicts of interest. As I left the conference room, I felt a weight on my shoulders. The satisfaction of exposing Sarah's betrayal was fading, replaced by the harsh reality of its consequences. Co-workers avoided eye contact as I walked past, clearly unsure how to act around me. Back at my desk, I started packing up my things for the move to my new department. As I did, I found a photo of Sarah and me from happier times. Anger surged through me, and I had to resist the urge to smash the frame. Instead, I took a deep breath and placed the photo in the box. It was evidence of a life I once had, a reminder of how quickly things can change. As I settled into my new workspace, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the end of the storm or just the eye of it? Only time would tell. A week had passed since the company bombshell, and life had settled into an uncomfortable new normal. My days were filled with mind-numbing data entry in my reassigned department, punctuated by whispers and sidelong glances from co-workers. The audit was in full swing, with a team of external accountants combing through years of financial records. The office felt like a pressure cooker, everyone on edge, waiting for the next shoe to drop. As I was leaving work on Friday, Linda caught up with me at the elevator. Mike, got a minute? I nodded, bracing myself for more bad news. The preliminary audit results are in, she said, her voice low. It's worse than we thought. Sarah's embezzlement goes back years, and there are signs that others were involved. My stomach churned. Others? Who? Linda shook her head. We're not sure yet, but it looks like it goes high up. Maybe even to Robert. I leaned against the wall, processing this. Jesus, what happens now? We're cooperating fully with the authorities. There will likely be arrests soon. She paused, looking at me intently. Mike, I know this is a lot, but I want you to know that your job is safe. In fact, once this all blows over, we'd like to discuss a promotion. I managed a weak smile. Thanks, Linda. I appreciate it. As I drove home, my mind was reeling. A promotion? It felt wrong to benefit from this mess, but I couldn't deny the validation it brought. At least someone recognized that I'd done the right thing, even if my methods were questionable. At home, I found a letter waiting for me. My hands shook as I recognized Sarah's handwriting on the envelope. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Mike, I know you probably hate me right now, and I don't blame you. What I did was unforgivable, both to you and to the company. But there's more to this story than you know. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I am asking for a chance to explain. Meet me at our old spot by the lake tomorrow at noon if you want to hear the truth. Sarah. I crumpled the letter, my emotions a swirling mess of anger, curiosity, and a traitorous hint of longing. I knew I should ignore it, that nothing good could come from meeting her, but a part of me needed closure, needed to understand why. I poured myself a drink and sank into the couch, the weight of the decision heavy on my mind. As I sat there, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Local tech company rocked by embezzlement scandal. CEO steps down. So it had begun. The ripple effects of Sarah's actions and my exposure of them were spreading far and wide, and I was caught in the middle of the storm. I looked at the crumpled letter on the coffee table. Meeting Sarah could jeopardize everything. My job, my credibility, maybe even my freedom if she tried to implicate me somehow. But not going meant always wondering, always questioning. As the night wore on, I wrestled with the decision. By the time I fell into a fitful sleep, I still wasn't sure what I would do, but I knew that whatever choice I made in the morning would set the course for everything that followed. The question was I ready to face whatever truth awaited me? I arrived at the lake early, my blood boiling with each passing minute. This place, once filled with happy memories, now felt like a mockery of everything I'd lost. At noon sharp, I saw Sarah approaching. She looked different, tired, worn down. Good, I thought. Let her suffer. Mike, she said softly as she reached me. I wasn't sure you'd come. I laughed coldly. What, and missed the chance to see the great Sarah brought low? Not for the world, sweetheart. She flinched at my tone, and I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. I wanted to explain, she began, but I cut her off. Explain? Oh, this should be good. Go ahead, Sarah. Explain how you fucked half the office. Explain how you stole from the company. Explain how you made me look like a goddamn fool. My voice rose with each word until I was practically shouting. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Mike, please, it's not that simple. Simple? I spat. No, simple would have been keeping your legs closed and your hands out of the company coffers. But that was too much to ask, wasn't it? She tried to reach out to me, but I stepped back, my face contorted with disgust. Don't you dare touch me! I lost myself, Mike, she pleaded. The power, the thrill! I cut her off again. Spare me your pathetic excuses. You didn't lose yourself, Sarah. You showed your true self. A cheating, thieving, sorry excuse for a human being. Sarah's face crumpled, but I felt no pity, only a cold, hard anger. I'm turning myself in, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I laughed again, the sound harsh and mirthless. How noble of you. Want a medal for finally doing the right thing? Too little, too late, Sarah. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. There's more, Mike. Robert was involved. There are documents. I don't give a damn about Robert or your documents, I snarled. You made your bed, now lie in it. Alone. I noticed 2 police officers approaching. Sarah had called them, apparently deciding to turn herself in. As the officers neared, I leaned in close to Sarah, my voice low and venomous. I hope you rot in jail, Sarah, and I hope that every day you remember what you threw away, because I sure as hell will never forget. Sarah's tears were flowing freely now, but they didn't move me. As the officers led her away, she turned back one last time. I'm so sorry, Mike, for everything. I hope someday you can forgive me. I stared at her, my gaze hard and cold. Don't hold your breath. I watched as Sarah was placed in the police car, feeling nothing but a grim satisfaction. As the car drove away, I turned my back on the lake, on the memories, on Sarah. Let her deal with the consequences of her actions. I was done. It was time to rebuild my life, and I'd do it without an ounce of sympathy for the woman who'd destroyed everything. As I walked away, I felt lighter. The anger was still there, but now it fueled me. Sarah wanted forgiveness? Too bad. Some things are unforgivable, and she'd just have to live with that. In the days following my confrontation with Sarah, a strange calm settled over me. The anger that had fueled me for so long began to cool, hardening into a steely resolve. The news of Sarah's arrest and the subsequent investigation dominated the office gossip. I kept my head down, focusing on my work and ignoring the whispers and stares. Let them talk. I had nothing to be ashamed of. A week after Sarah's arrest, Linda called me into her office. Mike, she said, her expression serious, I need to ask you something. Did Sarah mention anything about Robert's involvement when you met her? I paused, considering my response. Part of me wanted to spill everything, to let the whole corrupt system burn. But then I remembered Sarah's tear-stained face, her pleading eyes. Why should I help her, even indirectly? No, I lied smoothly. She didn't mention anything about Robert, just tried to make excuses for herself. Linda nodded, looking relieved. All right. Thank you, Mike. And listen, we're still dealing with the fallout, but I want you to know that your position here is secure. In fact, we're considering you for a promotion once the dust settles. I smiled, feeling a sense of vindication. I appreciate that, Linda. Thank you. As I left her office, I caught sight of Robert hurrying down the hallway looking nervous. For a moment, I felt a twinge of guilt. But then I remembered all the pain, all the humiliation. Robert, Sarah, all of them. They made their choices. Now they could deal with the consequences. Over the next few months, the company went through a major overhaul. Robert resigned, citing personal reasons, though the rumor mill suggested he'd cut a deal to avoid prosecution. Several other executives were fired or left quietly. Through it all, I kept my head down and worked hard. 6 months after that day by the lake, I found myself in a new office with a shiny new title, Director of Operations. The view from up here was pretty sweet. As I settled into my new role, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Sarah, postmarked from the state penitentiary. For a long moment, I stared at the envelope, my emotions swirling. Then, without opening it, I dropped it into the shredder. The past was the past. I had a new life now, and I'd built it on the ashes of Sarah's betrayal. Let her rot with her guilt and her apologies. I was done with all of that. That evening, as I left the office, I caught my reflection in the elevator doors. The man staring back at me was harder, colder perhaps, but stronger too. Sarah's betrayal had broken me, but I'd put myself back together. And this new version of me? He wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of him ever again. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I felt a sense of freedom. The anger, the pain, the bitterness, I was leaving it all behind. Sarah, Robert, the whole sordid affair, they were just stepping stones that led me here. I hailed a cab, giving the driver the address of an upscale bar downtown. I had a date tonight with a woman I'd met at a corporate event. She was smart, ambitious, and had never met Sarah, a clean slate. As the cab pulled away from the curb, I allowed myself a small smile. The future was looking bright. And this time, I was in control. Sarah's betrayal had taught me a valuable lesson. Trust no one completely, and always look out for number one. It wasn't the happily ever after I'd once dreamed of. But as I watched the city lights blur past the cab window, I realized something. This ending? It was better. Because this time I was the author of my own story. And in this story, I won. Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support and for tuning into my stories on YouTube. Your enthusiasm and feedback mean the world to me. Stay tuned for more exciting tales. Warm regards.